another quick break. Hopefully, when we come right back from that quick break, we will be able to go to that live stream of King Charles addressing Congress. So don't touch that dial. Stay tuned. We will be right back here on Roxom TV with more. See you soon.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Welcome back to Roxom TV. We are still waiting on King Charles to apparently arrive for his address. So if we do have news that he has arrived and is going to begin that address shortly, we'll go ahead and cut to that. But in the meantime, we've got a couple stories around our friend Marco Rubio. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is calling the Strait of Hormuz an economic nuclear weapon. He accused Iran of deliberately pointing it at the rest of the world. Let's take a look.
Reports do indicate Iran has offered to open the straits, but they want to delay conversations about their nuclear program. Would this be acceptable to the Trump administration?
Well, again, I'm not going to speculate about the president's decision-making on this matter. Suffice it to say that the nuclear question is the reason why we're in this in the first place. Look what they've done with the Straits. Great example. The Straits is basically the equivalent of an economic nuclear weapon that they're trying to use against the world. And they're bragging about it. They're putting up billboards in Tehran bragging about how they can hold 25% or 20% of the world's energy hostage. Imagine if those same people had access to a nuclear weapon. They would hold the whole region hostage.
Do you believe the Iran? If there is no deal, what comes next?
Well, again, that's the president's decision to make. I would start out by reminding everybody that the level of sanctions on Iran are extraordinary. The pressure on Iran is extraordinary. And I think more can be brought to bear. So our targets will always be things that support the regime directly.
Iran's parliament is simultaneously advancing a law that would formalize IRGC authority over the strait and require transit fees paid in the Iranian rial. The UN's maritime agency has said there is no legal basis for any of it. The U.S. appears not to be flinching. Treasury Secretary Bessent posted Monday that, quote, while the surviving IRGC leaders are trapped like drowning rats in a sewage pipe, Iran's creaking oil industry is starting to shut in production thanks to U.S. blockade, adding that, quote, pumping will soon collapse, and that, quote, gasoline shortages in Iran are next. Now, again, I think the U.S. has a lot more bargaining power here, given we have a lot more firepower here. Let's see what happens, but it is very much true that this one little strait has a lot of economic power over the rest of the world. Less so on the United States itself, given that we technically have the ability to be totally energy independent. But, you know, as for Europe, well, I'm sure they would like to see that strait open a heck of a lot more than we would. Moving on here to another Rubio story, because Marco Rubio is also laying out the Trump administration's position on Cuba. In an interview with Fox News, Rubio said Cuba is a failed state hosting Chinese and Russian intelligence operations 90 miles from American soil, and that's not good for the U.S. His framing was blunt. Cuba either collapses or it reforms. And reform, he said, is impossible with the current government in power. Let's take a look.
The other thing is it can get better. But in order for it to get better, they do need very substantial and serious economic reforms. Those serious economic reforms are impossible with these people in charge. It can't happen. And these people in charge aren't just economically incompetent. They have rolled out the welcome mat to adversaries of the United States to operate within Cuban territory against our national interest with impunity. We are not going to have a foreign military or intelligence or security apparatus operating with impunity 90 miles off the shores of the United States. That's not going to happen under President Trump.
The on-the-ground reality backs him up on the collapse part. Cuba's national power grid has failed completely 3 times since March, leaving 11 million people without electricity. Trash is piling up in Havana's streets because garbage trucks don't have fuel to run. Rubio is right that Marxism failed Cuba. He's also describing a country of 11 million people that America is actively squeezing into humanitarian collapse as a policy tool. However, that humanitarian collapse is very much a product of Cuba's own making, or should I say communism's own making. The Cuban government is incompetent, repressive, and has rolled out the welcome mat for Beijing's intelligence apparatus. Of course, the Cuban people didn't vote for any of that. But as always with communism, you vote your way in and you shoot your way out. But what happens after that regime fails? Because 11 million people 90 miles from Florida without a functioning economy, power grid, or government is not a foreign policy win. It may be a migration crisis. But of course, my take on this, there's already been a migration crisis. People have already been coming to Cuba, or excuse me, no one's going to Cuba. Everybody is, except maybe Hassan Piker, to stay at a 5-star hotel, which was the only one that had power on the entire island while everybody else languished in darkness. But here's the thing. Nobody ever tries to escape to communism. Nobody ever escapes from a capitalist country to a communist country. And I've seen, maybe it's just the algo feeding me this stuff on X. It certainly is. But just so many absolutely smooth-brained, mid-curve, not even mid-curve, bordering on just low, absolutely lowest of the low IQ takes on the fact that, capitalism is the failure and we just need communism or democratic socialism to save us. Thank God we have Zoran Mamdani in New York who will give us state-run grocery stores because that always works out really well. I mean, again, nobody ever tries to escape from capitalism to communism. People don't flee from South Korea to North Korea. People don't flee from America to Cuba, right? People didn't flee from West Germany to East Germany. Well, technically, anybody who tried to flee from East Germany just got shot as they went over the wall, but that's a different story, right? Nobody ever tries to flee to communism. Just want to say that one more time for anybody who didn't get that. Nobody ever tries to flee to communism. Everybody tries to escape communism. Communism does not work. It is not America's fault that communism doesn't work. America is not a communist country. America didn't invent communism. America doesn't practice communism, except for some of our representatives may want to change that, but that's a different story. The point here is that we know that communism doesn't work. You can look at any example. Look at Venezuela versus Poland, right? On a similar timeline. There's all these charts that go around from our world and data that break this down really well. Look at GDP in general, economic output, standard of living. Look at any metric you want that measures how well people live in communist countries versus capitalist countries, or at least pseudo-capitalist countries, right? It's just almost laughable. Look at North Korea versus South Korea. This is one of the most classic and just beautifully illustrative examples. Not beautiful for the people of North Korea who suffer and die under a communist dictatorship, but beautiful for the rest of us who can look at this with our own 2 eyes, not in a historical example, but in a modern day one happening right now in front of you. And you can see that at night from space, North Korea is dark. South Korea is lit up like a Christmas tree, right? You can look at the economic output of South Korea, the standard of living of South Korea, how much South Korea has been able to achieve since the Korean War, how much it's become really such an economic powerhouse in such a short period of time, how the standard of living has risen astronomically in that short period of time. And then you look at North Korea. They're cut off from the internet. They don't have access to any sort of data outside of their own communist dictatorship. There are, quote, elections, but, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Their illustrious leader always happens to win, And it's also just this absurdist thing. What I dislike is when people try to frame the Cuba situation as America doing this to Cuba. Well, it's American sanctions that are causing these problems. No, it's not. It's communism that is causing these problems. This is a really, really easy one, guys. It is communism that caused these problems. America didn't cause hundreds of millions of people to die from communist regimes over the last 100 years, right? It was the communist regimes that did that, either through executions, starvations, wars, whatever it might have been. Hundreds of millions of people have died from communism. Communism is an ideology, a political ideology that is deadly. All right? And it's not deadly for the people at the top. The people at the top especially during, let's talk, the Eastern Bloc of Europe, during that period, ill-fated period of communism. The people at the very top, they had access to Swiss bank accounts back when Swiss bank accounts were, actually more useful, before they were like KYC'd, right? You just had the number. But boy, bygone days, right? But they had access to external banking. They were basically raping and pillaging their countries and taking all of the economic wealth they could, extracting it for themselves, and then, taking that out of the country and putting it somewhere that they could later use, right? This is the story again and again and again with all of the Eastern Bloc communist countries. It's just, it's frustrating, because when you see people, let's say we're in the year 2026, if you hear somebody talking about, like, wow, if we just got Nazism right this time, then maybe it would be okay, right? We just didn't do Nazism right the first time. Well, that's like an absurd statement, right? That's an absurd statement. If you are a Nazi in the year 2026, people look at you correctly with horror, like an actual Nazi, not the ones that like the liberal media wants to paint somebody as. Like, I myself could probably be declared a Nazi by the liberal media just because I don't subscribe to all the delusions that they set themselves up for. But I'm talking about actual Nazis, right? That's absurd, right? That's an absurd position to take. Everybody knows that's absurd. But somehow, in the year 2026, even after hundreds of millions of people dying over the last century because of communism or socialism, which is just a bridge to communist totalitarianism, even after all of that death and destruction, again, hundreds of millions of people dying at the proverbial hands of this backwards, murderous ideology, this inhuman, this unnatural ideology, even after all of that, you've got so many people in the media, in academia, or just your average Joe Blow who are very, very proud to be they're communists, right? They're Marxists. It's like that's worse than being a Nazi. Like, if you're just talking about death toll, communism is orders of magnitude greater death toll than the Nazis, right? And communism has been stretched out. The suffering has been so long under communism. Nazism was snuffed out pretty quickly, right? Communism has somehow it's this insidious ideology that, again, has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of millions of people over the last century. If you hear somebody saying in this year, 2026, that they're a communist, or I'm a democratic socialist, anybody who says that they're a socialist, it's like, you're just right on the road to communism. You're almost there. And you probably already, are a communist. You just don't really want to say it out loud yet. You're just identifying as a socialist. Your pronouns are socialist, but you should treat them with the same sort of scorn, derision, and outright mockery that you treat anyone who says, I'm a Nazi in the year 2026. Those are both equally untenable positions to have. It is absurd that we have normalized the fact, or that I should say, you and I didn't do this, right? But that it has been normalized, excuse the passive voice there, but I don't know how else to say it. It has been normalized that it's okay to be a communist these days. It's okay because, let's tax the rich, right? It's all of this just absurd rhetoric that appeals to the lowest of the low IQ. And maybe I should take a step back, because I understand that people are struggling, right? It's not an easy time for us to survive, right? For us to subsist. Now, granted, still easier than at any point in history. Throughout all of human history, there's never been an easier time actually to survive, relatively speaking, because, of course, the glories of capitalism have lifted the entire world out of abject poverty. You've gone from like greater than 90 or 95% of people living in abject poverty to like over 90 or 95% of people at least being able to survive and are not in complete poverty, right? Capitalism did that. It wasn't communism that did that. And we don't even have exactly true capitalism, right? We've got this simulacrum of capitalism. We've got sort of a little bit of a mirage of capitalism because we have still so much state intervention. People say, well, if America adopted more socialist policies, then we'd be better off. Why can't we just have a little compassion, a little empathy? And it's like, where have you been, bro? Have you seen our spending on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, homelessness spending, where in New York they spend more on each homeless person than the median worker makes in a year? Like, that is socialism already. You're already redistributing, right? Now, and it's already forced redistribution, Because what happens if you say, I'm not going to pay these taxes anymore? You guys are misappropriating my money. You're spending it on massively fraud-filled entitlement programs. Like we know this now. We're seeing this in every state. This isn't just a blue state thing. This is an every state thing where you have massive fraud in all of these different entitlement socialist programs. But if you try to resist that, if you try to say, no, I'm done paying these taxes, people think that we Bitcoiners are being hyperbolic when we say things like, the taxes they're enforced with the threat of violence, right? Like the end result is they'll kill you. They say, well, you Bitcoiners are being so hyperbolic. Let me walk you through a really easy example. Just try not paying your taxes. Try not paying your property taxes as one example. Try not paying your property taxes or your income taxes, right? You don't pay for long enough. The IRS sends people to your house. If you then refuse to see them, you deny them access to your property. And by the way, IRS agents can be armed too. If you deny them access to your property, you say, get off my property. This is private property. You're trespassing, da-da-da-da. Well, they'll come back with more men with guns. They'll eventually come back with a SWAT team. I know this from a personal story of somebody who lives near me and witnessed this happen to their neighbor who owed back property taxes. And the guy ended up leaving, but they sent a literal SWAT team with also we're talking armored vehicles, attack dogs, actual military weapons, not just like what leftists think, military weapons are, and kicked down the guy's door. If the guy would have been there and in any way tried to resist, you know what happens? If you try to resist that, they will kill you. And that's for not paying your taxes. So you just really easily take this to the logical conclusion. And again, there are people who would champion this and say, well, why should the rich have so much? Why should the poor have so little? And yes, there is an insane amount of inequality that exists in the world, right? But same as it ever was. There is always inequality. Has some of that inequality been exacerbated recently? Yeah, you can absolutely make that argument. But the problem is that you're making that argument from the basis that this inequality is just caused by rich people being greedy, right? That this inequality is caused by the greedy corporations and the greedy billionaires and all this. And somehow they're the cause of all of society's woes. Okay, here's the thing. This is just not how things work. In reality, if you actually cared about inequality, you would care about dismantling the Federal Reserve. Yes, there is inequality right now. Okay, you could say okay, here's the other thing. You look at the absolute, the poorest person in America, they still have running water. They still have a toilet, they still have plumbing, right? They the poorest person in America is still better off than, let's say, 90%, 95% of people for all of human history. That's beside the point. That argument's not going to ring true with a lot of people. But to the people out there who look at the current state of things, look at the inequality, and then say, well, the only solution is for the government to have more power. I feel bad for you. I feel bad for you because giving the government more power never works. What works is taking power away from the government, right? What works is taking the power of the money printer away from the governments, the separation of money and state. That's what we have actually with Bitcoin. That is the beautiful thing, is that you can finally save in a money, because you can't save in fiat. It's terrible for saving. We've drilled this one home countless times. I'll drill it home again if I need to. But the problem is you can't save in fiat. You can't save in the money itself because it's constantly being devalued. With Bitcoin, you can actually save in the money itself. You actually have a way to protect the value of your time and energy, of your labor, right? Even if you subscribe to the labor theory of value somehow delusionally in the year 2026 again. But unfortunately, we've got a bunch of people out there who would rather have the algorithm and, mid-curve politicians do their thinking for them. They've outsourced their thinking. They've abdicated responsibility for their own brain. And they decide to instead think, we're going to bring this back full circle here to communism, that the answer is communism. Because what is communism? Communism is giving the government ultimate power. It's saying that the government is smarter than individuals acting in their own interest, their own individual interest. Subjective value, right? Communists must completely reject that. They go with Marx's labor theory of value, right? But unfortunately, that's just blatantly not true. It's just like and I can spend so much time absolutely dismantling that. Perhaps I need to, but unfortunately, the communists don't listen. The communists don't listen. What they want to do is screech at everybody who is perceived as having more than them and try to take them down. Communism is an ideology of envy, ultimately. It's an ideology of envy. And again, I am all for more fairness in this world, not more equality, because equality has to be forced. Equality is unnatural, right? The predator and the prey are not equal. They never will be. Equality is not natural, but perhaps we do have an inordinate amount of inequality, a large gap between the richest and the poorest, right? Of course, there's always the gap between the king and the peasant was monumental, like unfathomable, but that's too inconvenient to talk about, right? And the point here being, communism is not the answer. Socialism is not the answer. The answer is not giving the government more power over all of our lives. That never works. You don't have to look far. You can just look over at North Korea right now, right? You can look over at them right now. You don't even have to look back in history. You can look in the present day and see what happens when these idiotic, evil policies are taken to their logical extreme, which is widespread subjugation of the people, death, either by execution or by famine, a complete eradication of free speech, free association, freedom to protest your government. All of those things that, people like to claim that we were losing in America because we're living in this some crazy fascist system, right? Which I would, again, like communists love to use the word fascism because they don't know what it means. But again, I digress. Point here, and then we'll take a little bit of a break, and maybe we'll get to go back to our a live stream of our former colonizer, the good old England, coming over here to address us American peasants. But maybe what I'll leave you with is this, and then we'll probably come back to this because, my God, it bears repeating. And I know that sometimes, Bitcoiners like myself may get we may get labeled as saying, like, you guys you're repeating the same messaging over and over. And the same with people like myself who talk about the dangers of communism again and again and again. Well, I wouldn't need to if people would stop trying to force communism down everyone's throats and try to claim that the evils of communism are somehow caused by capitalism. It's just not true, guys. Communism is a destructive ideology that has resulted already and will continue to result for as long as it is able to keep on keeping on. It has resulted in hundreds of millions of deaths over the last century. It is a terrible, backwards, inhuman, unfair ideology. Like, if you care about fairness, then you can't care, like you can't have things that are fair and equal. It doesn't work like that. Fair is what Bitcoin is, right? Fair is everybody having the same rules. Those rules being applied equally no matter who you are, what your status is, how much money you have the same set of rules. Equal is when you make things unfair by trying to force equality. Again, equality itself is unnatural. That is not the natural state of things, right? Now, again, you can say, well, but Walker, maybe the inequality is worse than it's ever been. Debatable, right? Because the standard of living of everyone in the world has been raised through capitalism. Meanwhile, the standard of living of any communist country has degraded while the rest of the world has leapfrogged them again and again and again. But okay, let's say you still hold that position. If you do hold that position, but you don't also care about dismantling the central banks, dismantling the money printer, taking the money printer out of the hands of a cabal of private bankers and the state, if you don't care about that, then you're just an absolute LARP. Of course, all communism, all communists, all socialists are LARPs, right? They're live action role playing. Why? Because communism and socialism, to believe in these things in this day and age, in 2026, is to completely reject reality. You have to reject reality. You have to ignore the evidence of your eyes and ears. What's that from 1984? Orwell, what's the quote? The party's final command was to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. That is what the communists and the socialists ask you to do, to still believe that this horrific ideology, which has resulted in so much untold death and destruction, is somehow the way to save us all now. That if we just give the government more power one more time, this time we'll get it right. We just didn't, We just didn't quite get communism right those first many few times, right? We'll get it right this time, guys. Just give daddy government a little bit more power to redistribute things, and then it'll all be fixed. My God, it's like, boy, if you really believe this, why don't you go ahead and flee to Cuba or North Korea or another communist country? You know, if go ahead and find one out there, right? You won't, because nobody, where we came from the start of this, nobody ever flees to a communist country from a capitalist country. Everyone wants to flee from communist countries to capitalist countries. This should be so obvious to everybody with a functioning brain, but unfortunately it's not. And if you actually want to educate yourself, if you're listening to this somehow and you're saying, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, communism will work this time, why don't you actually go talk to people who lived through and escaped from communism? I do on a daily basis, right? Like my wife's family literally escaped communism. I talk with people who escaped communism all the time, right? This is not me making stuff up from my privileged American status, but we are privileged to be here in the United States of America. That's why everybody wants to come here, despite the rhetoric that America is terrible, America is bad, America is fascist, all of these things. You hear how terrible America is all the time, and somehow everyone still wants to come here. Why is that? Grapple with that question. Ask yourself that question. If America is so terrible, if capitalism or the simulacrum of capitalism that we have here, because you can't truly have true capitalism when the money is controlled by a centralized group. Marx also advocated for central control of credit in the Communist Manifesto. If you've read it, you'd know that central banks are inherently communist. Again, I digress. But again, if America is so terrible, if capitalism is so terrible, if communism is so great, why do people only ever flee from communism and flee to capitalism? Why do people only ever flee to America, right? If America is so terrible, why is everybody still trying to come here? I don't know. I'll leave you to grapple with that question while we take a quick commercial break. Again, I'm Walker America. We're here on RoxomTV. We're hopefully going to hear from our former colonizer, King Charles. Not that he did the colonization, but gosh, the guy feels like he might be old enough to have been there. We're hopefully going to hear from him soon, see what he has to say, give you some commentary on it. In the meantime, we've got a bunch of other stories and probably more rants on communism from me in the meantime. So if you like that kind of thing, stick around. Don't touch that dial. We will be right back here on RoxomTV in just a moment. Stay tuned.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Oh, I forgot to mention, dividends on Roxom are paid in Bitcoin. Stretch your income, 11.5% paid in Bitcoin.
Stretch your income to 11.5, get 11.5 in Bitcoin and Roxom. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is 76,166 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. And Tether is currently putting some of those Bitcoins into users' hands directly. Tether CEO Paolo Ardoino just announced a live Bitcoin faucet tied to the new Tether wallet, letting users claim small amounts of Bitcoin over Lightning by simply downloading the app and engaging on X. It is a throwback to early Bitcoin culture, faucets that onboard new users, but now plugged into one of the largest crypto distribution networks on Earth. I was not around for those early faucets. Unfortunately, I was too busy ignoring them and doing other dumb things. But now at least I can get a few extra sats. But this follows Tether's broader wallet launch earlier this month, which it claims reaches over 570 million users globally. Arduino framed it as a mission-driven rollout, calling it Tether Wallet, the people's wallet, bringing financial inclusion to billions left behind by the traditional system. The pitch is simple: self-custody by default, Bitcoin on-chain and Lightning, plus stablecoins and gold, all in one app with features like gasless transfers and simplified UX aimed at non-technical users. The faucet itself is small in size but big in signal. Tether is actively onboarding users into Bitcoin rails, not just stablecoins. Arduino is set to speak at the Bitcoin conference today, where this faucet and Tether's broader Bitcoin strategy will likely get more announcements. And I think this is really interesting. Again, Tether is a company that is obviously one of the most, if not the most profitable, especially on a per capita, per head count basis, profitable companies in the history of the world, right? They're now one of the biggest buyers of U.S. treasuries. They own a significant stack of Bitcoin. They own a significant stack of gold. They have other investments. They've invested in a ton of different technologies, things like that. They've got their hole punch technology that they've invested in, have built out internally. Keat as well, if nobody's using, peer-to-peer messaging and file transfer. They've funded a lot of stuff, even like kind of a Neuralink competitor, let's say, for neural implants. I think it's Blackstone maybe, or it's not related to either Blackstone or BlackRock, but it's named similarly. I forget the name, so excuse me. They've invested into a lot of things. They also are obviously, they put out Tether, USDT. It's a massive, massive stable coin. That is how they, they basically, print that stable coin in exchange for your US dollars. They then invest those proceeds from that into US treasuries, Bitcoin, gold, other things. They are making massive, massive billions upon billions of dollars in profit. It's nice to see them embracing Lightning. I know that with the Rumble wallet rollout, they also invested, I think it was 170 million into Rumble. Don't quote me on that exactly. It was a large sum of money. Maybe it was 70 million. It was a lot. It was a lot of money. Invested that into Rumble. They all helped Rumble roll out a wallet. One of the things I was disappointed about with the Rumble wallet was that it did not have Lightning enabled, or even Bitcoin on Liquid enabled off the bat, right? Maybe they're going to roll that out. They may have rolled it out since I last checked out the Rumble wallet. So that was a little bit disappointing, right? Because I know the folks at Tether are ultimately the ones that I have gotten a chance to meet there are Bitcoin maximalists at the end of the day. Yes, they provide a stable coin, but I've literally even the folks at Tether themselves will be like, look, Tether itself is a shitcoin, right? It's because it's tied to the US dollar, and the US dollar is a shitcoin. Like, there's Bitcoin, there's everything else. They make, there's no two ways about that for them. And so it's nice to see these sorts of faucets popping back up. Fold is a company that has done that. Bitcoin only company Fold has done that for a long time now. You can spin the wheel daily on Fold, get a few sats, which may not seem like a lot. Maybe you're getting 1 sat, 10 sat, 100 sats for every spin in the wheel. But those sorts of things add up, right? Getting 5 Bitcoin in one of the original faucets didn't seem like a lot at that time either, right? Because Bitcoin was barely worth anything in US dollar terms. Now you hear about that and you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe they were just giving away 5 Bitcoin at a time. It's going to be a similar thing with these faucets that we have now, with Tether's faucets, with Fold, with any of the other faucets that have popped up, it's going to be a similar thing where you look back and say, you know what, they were giving away 100 sats. They were giving away 1,000 sats. I mean, I can't believe that. Can you believe they were just giving away this Bitcoin like that? Incredible. I think people don't realize that, don't realize how absolutely scarce Bitcoin truly is, and how any of these faucets, if you have the opportunity, go ahead and get yourself those free sats, right? I'm glad to see Tether has Lightning enabled in this wallet from the start. That obviously just makes sense. Also, Tether has run, people may not know this, they've run one of the largest Lightning nodes for years, or Bitfinex has, which is, associated with Tether through means that I don't understand. But like Bitfinex has run, I think either the first, second, or third largest node at any given time on the Lightning Network has been run by Bitfinex for years. People may not know that, but it is a fact, right? They've been providing massive thousands and thousands of Bitcoin in liquidity to the Lightning Network for a long time. So they obviously understand this stuff. Again, at the end of the day, they're Bitcoiners. So it's great to see them having Lightning enabled in this wallet from the start. I think this is fantastic. I have not downloaded it myself yet, but I likely will probably after this stream. And, people may, I always see a lot of pushback on stable coins. My friend Jeff Booth calls them guaranteed loss coins, which I think is actually a much better term than stable coin. And Jeff is absolutely correct there, because of course they are tied to the US dollar. They're not a good way to save money compared to Bitcoin, right? They're not going to hold their value or gain in value relative to everything else like Bitcoin will. That being said, it's very easy for us to say that as Americans or people who live in the so-called developed world, the Western world. Where do stablecoins, specifically Tether, have the greatest adoption? Well, it's in the global South. It's people who jump at the chance to get access to a US dollar denominated token, to a stablecoin. They jump at that chance because even the US dollar, which is the US dollar is the worst except for all the rest, right? It's the worst fiat except for all the rest. It's the skinniest kid at fat camp, right? It's the prettiest horse at the glue factory. People around the world want US dollars. And yes, you can say, well, they should just use Bitcoin instead. Sure. But they want US dollars right now. They will want Bitcoin eventually, right? And a lot of them may already be like stable coins. I think are a good bridge to Bitcoin because this technology gets normalized more, right? Just being outside of those traditional fiat rails gets more normalized. And what I hope with this new wallet launch, what I hope to see is that you see more and more people, hey, getting this Tether wallet. I've already been using Tether for a while. Some countries you see where they have prices denominated in USDT, right? Because they've been using Tether as their de facto real currency because their own local currency is absolute horseshit. But I hope that this faucet specifically encourages a lot more people to start actually saving in Bitcoin, right? And whether they start saving it or transacting it at first, whether they're using it as a store of value or of a medium of exchange, doesn't really matter to me. Do whatever you want with your own money. It's yours. It's the whole point of Bitcoin. But I do think that these stable coins can be a bridge to Bitcoin adoption, specifically in areas like this, where Tether is actively making it possible for you to get a bit of Bitcoin as an incentive for using their wallet. Now, you may have concerns about Tether and USDC and these other things, and whether or not they're just government backdoors, and people love to jump and say, well, look, Tether just froze however much it was, $300 million at the behest of the U.S. government. It's like, where have you been for the past few years, right? This is not the first time they've done that. They've also have not tried to hide that fact. They made that fact very public that, look, we can freeze funds. And they've said that in contrast to Bitcoin, saying, look, Tether has the ability to freeze anyone's funds. So does USDC, right? They have the ability to freeze your funds. That this is not a secret, guys. This has always been the case. It's been happening for a while. They've not tried to hide it. And in fact, people on that Tether team have used it as a chance to say, look, and this is why if you don't want your funds to get frozen, you should use Bitcoin because nobody can stop you from using Bitcoin. Tether can stop you from using Tether. Circle can stop you from using USDC, right? All of these other things, everything that is not Bitcoin has the potential to be frozen, censored, stopped. Even these so-called DeFi protocols, we saw that Arbitrum, Kelp DAO, or whatever it was, Seaweed DAO hack, where Arbitrum froze those funds as well. So even things that broadcast themselves, market themselves as DeFi, can very easily be frozen, right? Tether at least is honest about it. They're like, yeah, we freeze this stuff. Like they publish it publicly. This isn't the first time it's happened also. So if you just started paying attention and saw like, look, Tether froze $300 million and you're outraged by that, it's like, well, you haven't been paying attention. They've been doing that for a while. They've never tried to hide that. That's actually been something that they have advertised that they can do, right? Is to enforce sanctions, enforce freezes, whatever it may be. This is not news. This is just the reality of dealing with a permissioned system. That is what Tether is. They've not tried to hide that. And you may have problems with that and say Bitcoin is superior. And yes, of course it is. And I bet if you ask just about every employee at Tether, they'd say, yeah, of course Bitcoin is superior. First of all, it's not tied to the US dollar, which is a shitcoin. And second of all, it can't be frozen by us. That being said, they're operating a business. People want their product. People want USDT all around the world. Again, their highest user base is not in America, not even close. It's the rest of the world that doesn't have access to the US financial rails, the US banking system. And so, again, I digress slightly here, but I think it's important because I think all of these sorts of steps where we see, first of all, a massive player like Tether coming out and enabling Lightning, enabling Bitcoin, turning on a Bitcoin faucet, no matter how small, even if it's just a few sats. I just saw somebody in the chat saying, I just lost it for a sec. Every sat is an unlimited fortune from Blessed Exile. And yes, Blessed Exile, you are absolutely correct. Every sat is an unlimited fortune, excuse me. It is a slice of a completely finite pie that is 21 million Bitcoin, right? 21 quadrillion sats. That is incredible. Take every free sat you can get, right? That is a gift. But again, for folks that are looking at what Tether does and saying, I don't like it. It's not as good as Bitcoin. Yeah, no shit, it's not. Nobody's trying to claim that it is. But people want a product. It is subjectively valuable to a huge swath of people around the world who don't have access to the US dollar system. You can have your qualms about that. You can say they should use Bitcoin, but okay, go and orange pill them yourself, right? And go and put out more education. Go and help show them why Bitcoin is actually superior. For them, a US dollar stablecoin is literally light years better than whatever their terrible local currency is, right? It's a heck of a lot better than the CFA franc, right? It's a heck of a lot better than the Venezuelan bolivar, right? It's a heck of a lot better than insert any other fiat out there because it's tied to the US dollar, which may be a shitcoin, it is, which may be a guaranteed loss coin, to quote Jeff Booth, but it's still better than all the other fiats out there. Maybe with the exception of the Swiss franc, right? But, Switzerland, as I've been told by many Swiss people, is the only first world country out there. If you spend a little bit of time in Switzerland, you start actually believing that too. What a beautiful country it is. But again, I think this is great. I think it is a net positive for companies like Tether to be opening up Bitcoin faucets, for them to be spreading Bitcoin around the world into their users' hands. Because, I think for all of us, it's like once you get that first little bit of Bitcoin and you hold that yourself, something changes inside you, right? Like that's really, until you start actually using Bitcoin, until you get a little bit of Bitcoin, everything's just academic. Everything is completely, just imaginary to you, right? But once you start actually using Bitcoin, saving in Bitcoin, seeing the power of it both as a store of value and a medium of exchange and a unit of account, that is when you really start going down that rabbit hole and realizing the power that it has. And unlike Tether, it cannot be censored, right? And again, everyone at Tether will tell you the same. They haven't tried to hide this. But let's go ahead and jump over to the next story because this just in, Jack Dorsey's block just hit a major milestone. Over 800,000 merchants now have Bitcoin payments enabled, with a new business turning it on every 8 seconds. This is one of the clearest signals yet that Bitcoin is moving beyond speculation and into real-world commerce at scale as a medium of exchange. Let's go ahead and take a look.
So where are we? A couple weeks ago, we announced Bitcoin payments auto-enrollment for eligible businesses, which means we're turning Bitcoin payments on seamlessly in the background without the merchant having to even know what Bitcoin is. When they get paid, it's converted to fiat into their normal account, and for them, it's just like a card payment, but with no processing fee in the middle. Today, we have over 800,000 payments-enabled businesses turning a new one on every 8 seconds.
That is just incredible. And what matters here is how this is being deployed, because Block is removing the friction that has historically slowed Bitcoin adoption at the point of sale. Merchants don't need deep technical knowledge, and users don't need to change behavior dramatically. The system is being designed to fit into existing habits, not fight them. This is infrastructure level thinking. And Miles Sutter framed the bigger picture. This isn't just about enabling payments. It's about preserving Bitcoin's original function in a world that's rapidly digitizing and centralizing financial control.
But why use it? Because if Bitcoin doesn't function as peer-to-peer electronic cash, if it just sits on balance sheets, it loses the quality that makes it transformational. The ability to transact freely, without permission, without a gatekeeper. And if we don't act now, the approaching all-encompassing digital age will take away this ancient concept of cash. And if we let that happen, it's something we'll never get back. Really think about that. For me, that's incredibly dangerous for human freedom around the world. The work to make this happen is a long journey, changing habits, building tools, making Bitcoin easier and easier year after year. That's what we've been doing since I first got here, and what we'll keep doing.
Block is pairing that vision with distribution. With tens of millions of active users already inside its ecosystem, the company is now focused on connecting demand with supply, making it easier for users to actually find and use Bitcoin in everyday settings. Early data already shows that when visibility improves, usage follows. At the same time, Block is aligning incentives across the network. Consumers are being rewarded for choosing Bitcoin at checkouts, while merchants benefit from a cost structure that undercuts traditional payment rails. That combination, user incentives plus merchant savings, is what drives real behavioral change. There's also a deeper layer here. Block is abstracting away complexity by letting Bitcoin function as the settlement layer, even when users won't directly interact with it. That is a major shift. It means Bitcoin can scale as infrastructure first, while user understanding catches up later. And to push adoption even further, Block introduced Tap to Pay for Bitcoin, bringing the experience closer to what users already expect from mobile payments.
We launched Bitcoin Map to show our nearly 60 million monthly actives on Cash App exactly where they can find Bitcoin-enabled merchants in their area. And for merchants on the map, their Bitcoin payment count is nearly 500% higher than if you're not on the map. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback we've heard, what if your barista doesn't even know what Bitcoin is? Now, they don't have to. The Bitcoin toggle on the customer-facing display means you choose how to pay. It's user-driven, no awkward conversation. You see the toggle, you can pay in Bitcoin. This is good for everyone. The merchant pays 0% processing, the network gets velocity, and you get 5% back in Bitcoin automatically through the rest of the year when you pay using Cash App. You can try it at the conference today. It's seamless and amazing. And you don't even have to spend your actual stack. Our new feature, Dollars on Lightning, lets you pay with your dollar balance, and it's settled over Lightning. No taxable event, and your Bitcoin balance stays untouched. You're just using this new monetary network to save on fees and really help the ecosystem. And so we're seeing pretty insane adoption of this already. And eventually, I think this is a primitive that will become important for our non-Bitcoin customers as well, just seamlessly behind the scenes. More to come there. And today, we're also excited to premiere another step forward towards ubiquitous Bitcoin payments, Tap to Pay. Changing user behavior is going to be one of the hardest parts of this journey of making Bitcoin everyday money. Thankfully, we're in a position to lead that charge because we own both sides of the counter. And with Tap to Pay, we're on our way to making Bitcoin payments feel as seamless as Apple Pay.
Meanwhile, the company continues to put skin in the game. Block added 114 BTC in Q1 2026, bringing its total holdings to 8,997 BTC, roughly $692 million. But the bigger story is transparency. Block just released its first proof of reserves report, verified by third-party auditors. 8,997 BTC in the corporate balance sheet, 19,357 held for Cash App users, 28,355 BTC total, about $2.5 billion. All of it is publicly verifiable on chain. From self-custody tools like BitKey to payments at scale to proof of reserves, Block is building across the entire stack. Anyone can buy Bitcoin. Very few are making it usable. And if Bitcoin is going to become money, it needs velocity, not just holders. Block is pushing that transition forward with 800,000 merchants already live. This is no longer just early experimentation. This is real adoption. And frankly, I love to see it. I love what Block has been doing. Again, when they rolled out the ability for merchants to opt in and turn on Bitcoin payments to their, I think Block has something like over 4 million merchant users throughout the US. This was an incredible first step, right? Because Bitcoin is, granted, like Bitcoin is an incredible store of value, right? It is the best store of value over a long period of time, right? It beats the pants off everything else. We all know this, right? But it's easy to forget that Bitcoin is also an incredible, unstoppable, unconfiscatable, unfreezable, uncensorable medium of exchange. And I like to see Block actually, stepping up to the plate to enable more medium of exchange Bitcoin adoption, because a lot of the friction was absolutely on the merchant side. It was at the point of sale. If you've tried to pay with Bitcoin somewhere, and I try to pay with Bitcoin whenever I have a chance, whether it's online or in person, right? Depending on what the merchant's using, how familiar their staff is with it. For instance, Steak and Shake has done a pretty great job with their rollout. I believe they've been using Speed Wallet as the back end, but they've done a pretty great job with that. Every time I've gone to Steak and Shake since they rolled out Bitcoin payments, I have paid in Bitcoin. I've had a perfect experience every time when I've used their indoor terminals. I've occasionally had a little bit of friction when I've paid going through the drive-through to get my tallow fries and tallow tater tots and grass-finished beef burgers. But the only friction would come from, it was usually maybe an older worker at the counter who was like, I would say I need to pay in Bitcoin, and they'd say, well, I need to get somebody else on their staff because they know how to do the Bitcoin thing. And they'd bring out one of the younger staff who would just pop it up on the tablet, and there it is, present the QR code to me, scan it, and done. But what Block is doing, it's amazing that Steak and Shake has done that. Shout out to Steak and Shake. They've also enabled, they've started stacking Bitcoin for their treasury. I believe they've are only holding and saving for their own treasury the Bitcoin that is received via Bitcoin payments. They also enabled that 21 cents paid in Bitcoin per hour as an additional vested bonus for their employees, which is amazing. That's amazing. That's also, it's one restaurant chain, right? It's not small. It's very large, and it's incredible to see what they're doing. I love it. To see what Block is doing takes that to another level, because Block is actually the infrastructure behind how so many merchants actually do commerce, right? It is their point of sale. And it's made it really accessible. Block has been doing that for years, making it super accessible for merchants to accept payment from customers without paying for these, super overpriced terminals from whatever other provider there might be. Block has done an incredible job of that. The fact that they have Cash App as well, like Miles Sutter said, they have both sides of the table, right? They have the merchant acceptance side. They have the point of sale. They also have Cash App. They have the consumer side, the customer side. That is super, super powerful. And the fact that they have integrated Bitcoin so deeply into everything they do, not just at the buying and selling level, right? A lot of folks have done that. That's fairly easy. But they've done it at the actual transactional level. They've done it at the infrastructure level, using Bitcoin, the Lightning Network, as the rails by which they are moving money around. And like you heard Miles say, whether the user is any the wiser or not doesn't matter. They're getting a better deal on this. Merchants are getting a better deal. Everybody's getting a better deal because they're using Bitcoin as the rails. And I think that this is so, so powerful. It is an amazing boon for Bitcoin adoption. And again, people may say, well, if I'm just holding Bitcoin, I'm still using Bitcoin. I agree. You're using Bitcoin as a store of value. Good for you. That's fantastic. I'm never going to knock that. What I will say is that personally, I think people should also use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. Now, again, I don't care if you do. You don't have to. It's your money. Use it however the heck you want. That's not for me to decide. You just holding Bitcoin is still using Bitcoin in one way. I like to use Bitcoin in multiple ways. I like to use Bitcoin as a store of value, obviously. also as a medium of exchange. And I try to denominate my life in it. I try to use it as my own personal unit of account because things get a lot more clear when you're looking at things through a denominator lens that is fixed. The 21 million, right? You know the denominator. That's a really powerful tool as well. That's more of a mental shift, right, on the unit of account side. But on the medium of exchange, that's something that's easy for people to do. It's been pretty easy for people to do already. There's so many different wallets out there. On-chain Bitcoin transactions have been around for a while. Lightning transactions for fewer years, obviously, but Lightning was a little bit rocky at first, right? Of course, it's gotten so much better. Even in just the last couple of years, the liquidity on the Lightning Network is incredible. You don't have payments that are, remember even like in 2022, I'd have Lightning payments that if I tried to, I remember I tried to pay for a hotel bill in El Salvador, and it was like $800 or something, for staying there for a number of days and drinking a lot of Supremas naturally. But there wasn't enough liquidity in the channels that I was connected to actually process that payment on Lightning, which was a bummer, right? You don't have those problems anymore. You've got just fat channels all over the place. And of course, there are also trade-offs, right? There are absolutely trade-offs with this whole thing. You're going to have you're going to have people that are going to not like the fact that Lightning is ultimately right now being used in a mainly custodial way. Like you're using it through a provider. People aren't running their own Lightning nodes. A lot of people are, a lot of people aren't. That's okay too, I think. There are going to always be trade-offs, right? There are trade-offs when you go from one layer to another. If you want absolutely uncensorable, non-custodial money that you yourself have the ultimate access to, well, you should use Bitcoin layer 1, right? Now, if you want something that's a little bit quicker, more convenient, you want faster, you want, very, very lightning fast payments, go ahead and use Lightning. Like there are trade-offs at every level. And so you need to be aware of those. You need to be cognizant of those. But ultimately, I think that this is such a hugely positive moment for Bitcoin adoption to see what Block has been doing. I also have an update here that it looks like King Charles will not talk until 3 p.m. EST. So in about 40 minutes, we'll plan on taking it live then at that point. In the meantime, we do have a couple more stories. Maybe one thing I would just double tap on here on the Block side is that, again, using Bitcoin just as a store of value, just holding it in self-custody, that is fantastic. And that is a fantastic first step, right? When you're ready, I highly recommend trying to pay for things in Bitcoin. It's fun. It's great. You can always just buy that Bitcoin right back. I know you've got excess fiat, right? Because you would otherwise just spend fiat on whatever you were about to buy. So go ahead and try paying in Bitcoin if you never have. It is a wonderful experience. Block's developments here have made that experience even better. It is only going to get smoother from here on out, and it's already so smooth. So give it a shot if you never have. I highly recommend it, and I think once you pay in Bitcoin once, you're going to want to do it again. Again, use your money how you want. Personally, I like to spend Bitcoin whenever I get the chance. I replace it with the excess fiat I would have spent on that transaction otherwise. And, you're doing your small part to help Bitcoin adoption grow, again, not just as a store of value, but as a medium of exchange. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story here, because a big conversation coming out of the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas was the long-anticipated market structure bill. And for the first time in months, there's an actual timeline attached. Senator Cynthia Lummis announced that Bitcoin and crypto market structure legislation will get marked up in May.
Opportunity to craft legislation in Washington. We are going to mark up the Clarity Act in May. We are going to get it to the finish line. We are going to have the market structure that allows us to innovate, you to innovate, America to lead the world on this freedom asset. God bless you. Thank you very much for the privilege of serving you in Washington, D.C.
What Lummis is signaling here isn't just general optimism, it is timing. A markup is the phase where amendments get negotiated and the actual language of the bill starts to solidify, which is the part that's been missing for the better part of a year. This follows comments from Scott Bessent, who told the Senate last week that passing market structure legislation is critical to maintaining U.S. leadership in global finance. The political push is clearly building, even if the framework itself is still incomplete. Yesterday in Vegas, SEC Chair Paul Atkins took the stage and basically threw the question right back across the street, urging Congress to move forward and making it clear the SEC is waiting on lawmakers to draw the lines.
Actually allow firms to experiment on-chain, build their securitized tokens and trade them on-chain here in the United States under an innovation exemption that we plan to issue here in the next few weeks, and then also to allow fundraising, through the sale of tokens on-chain through what we're calling Reg Crypto. So those things are in the offing. They'll be coming out soon, but I know the discussion here just a few minutes ago about the statute, which is the bill pending in Congress right now called the Clarity Act. We really need to have Congress speak to this area, and so we're ready, willing, and able to interpret what they say and to put that into rules that people then can rely on and pursue their innovative ideas. Again, here in the United States, they don't have to go offshore. That's what's really the concept here.
Yeah, lots of
Oh, goody. More tokenized securities. And that is the bottleneck right there, though, is that regulators don't want to lead on this. They want legal clarity from Congress before they put their name on anything. What Atkins is pointing towards centers on tokenization, on-chain securities, and regulated fundraising rails, which may open the door for genuine crypto innovation, not just shitcoin scammery, but also shows that a huge chunk of this bill is really about integrating tokens in the existing financial system. And from a Bitcoin lens, who the hell cares? The bigger unlock for Bitcoin specifically remains sovereign adoption and the strategic Bitcoin reserve conversation. But May is close after months of false starts, fake deadlines, and DC promising it was almost there. This is the first real signal that something might actually pass. The question now is whether Washington can turn the momentum into actual law, or whether this ends up being one more victory lap that quietly disappears by July. Now, a quick note on this here, because personally, in the Market Structure Clarity Act here, the only thing that actually matters to me as a Bitcoiner is whether or not developer protections are enshrined in this. And I believe we've got a story to cover that a little bit later, because right now, the remainder of the bill is all about, giving, again, clarity as to what the market structure should be, which regulators are in charge of, which shitcoins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there's the whole debate that's been going back and forth between big crypto, the likes of Coinbase, and the big banks, JP Morgan, et cetera, about whether or not stablecoin issuers will be able to offer yield on those stablecoins, right? And none of that has anything to do with Bitcoin at all. The only thing that does in that Market Structure Clarity Act is the open source developer protections that were part of the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, that was proposed as a standalone bill and then later was folded into this. We've covered that extensively on this show every other week. You may know that we have either Zach Cohen from the Bitcoin Policy Institute or another member of BPI come on and talk about what's happening. And that's one thing that has been a key focus for us when we talk to BPI here on Roxom is, are these developer protections going to remain in this bill? That's what BPI has been pushing really, really hard for. And this is, again, the thing that I think should matter most to Bitcoiners. You've got folks like Bill and Keone, the Samurai Wallet developers who are currently in federal prison. We've covered that extensively on this show. I will, once again, as every time that I bring this up, remind you to go to billandkeone.org and do sign that petition. Make your voice heard there. Keep talking about the Samurai Wallet case because it is so important. And if the Trump administration truly wants to make America the Bitcoin and crypto capital of the world, you can't do that if you're throwing open source developers in federal prison, right? That's just like a pretty basic, obvious thing. And so let's see. I mean, I am holding out for there to be a pardon for Bill and Keone, and for there's multiple other Bitcoin and crypto prisoners. By the way, Just because somebody is in the crypto space, I don't think that they should be put in federal prison for writing open source code, right? That's it doesn't matter your thought. I don't care if you're developing on Ethereum or Solana or whatever, or Bitcoin. If you are writing open source code and you are not handling any money, you're not actually breaking any laws, you're just being persecuted and then prosecuted by folks like the Southern District of New York or the Sovereign District of New York, as they're often called. I think that is absurd. You should not be in jail for that. And you will never make America the Bitcoin and crypto capital of the world if you do not pardon these developers whose crime was writing code in such a way that the government did not like. Like, that is just absurd. So pardon Samurai, pardon Roman Storm, pardon Ian Freeman, who wasn't even writing code, he was just operating Bitcoin ATMs. Like, again, another absurd story. But these people should be free. They should not be in federal prison right now, but they still are. So with the market structure, again, the part that I care about, and in my opinion, the part that you should care about as a Bitcoiner, I don't really care about the tokenization stuff. I don't really care about whether the SEC gives the green light for more shitcoins, right? The spring of shitcoins is always wet. But what I do care about is whether or not open source software developers can be put in federal prison for the crime of writing code. And that's something I think that every Bitcoiner should care about. So we'll leave it at that for right now. We're going to head to a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to be almost at the time where we'll have the King Charles live stream with some live and very appropriate commentary from me, of course, coming in alongside that. If it takes a little bit longer, don't worry. We've got a bunch more stories lined up for you. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We will be right back here on RoxomTV.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Oh, I forgot to mention, dividends on Roxom are paid in Bitcoin. Stretch your income, 11.5% paid in Bitcoin.
Stretch your income to 11.5, get 11.5 in Bitcoin and Roxom. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Imagine a constant Bitcoin cash flow. How about earning BTC every 2 weeks? Now you can buy Strive and Stretch on Roxom and stack Bitcoin every 2 weeks. That's the Bitcoin paycheck.
Welcome back to RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is $76,217 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. And we are back here with more stories because at the Bitcoin conference, FBI Director Kash Patel and U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche addressed the crowd for the first time. They called in remotely after plans to attend in person were scrapped following a weekend shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Both officials leaned into a more open posture toward Bitcoin, framing it as legitimate innovation, not a threat. Patel shared how he personally came to Bitcoin, describing it as a way to build a long-term monetary foundation for his family.
Finally started to get smart on it, and I was looking towards the future in terms of what the Attorney General was sharing, investing and also establishing a monetary basis and safeguards for my family and our future. And I was convinced through the massive amount of research my buddy told me to wade through, because I did not have a proper understanding of it, as most Americans do.
He also said Bitcoin is here to stay.
We're here to partner with you proactively. We'd rather get in front of it with you and continue to do the historic work that President Trump has done for the Bitcoin and virtual asset community. I mean, literally, have you ever heard of another president having a Bitcoin or crypto czar? I haven't. And so that's how much in front of it we want to get. So I encourage everybody out there, as the Attorney General said, we're not going to prosecute and investigate you for the lawful use of it. We want you to keep your money. We want you to keep your digital assets. We want you to keep your Bitcoin. And if there's any bad actors that are attacking you or your company, they're probably doing it to thousands of other people. And you coming forward to us in a safe space is going to save your digital assets and money, but also going to instill confidence in Americans that this is the right way forward and Bitcoin's not going anywhere.
So that framing does matter, because this doesn't just seem like abstract policy anymore, but some conviction at the highest levels of law enforcement. The key moment came on developers. Blanche made it clear writing code is not a crime and developers are not the target.
If you are a developer, if you are part of a platform, whether it's in the United States or elsewhere, we are not going to take your liberty away and prosecute you when there's not even a developed regulation that points clearly to a law that you're violating or some maxim that you're violating. And unfortunately, the last administration did that. And they did that a lot. They had a cryptocurrency enforcement team. And so imagine the Department of Justice had an entire enforcement team of prosecutors, and there wasn't even any regulations around the industry at that point. And really something I thought was fundamentally unfair to the industry, to the coders that are out there, but also anybody in the crypto stream that was affected by that. Now, to be clear, and I think this is comforting to everybody in the audience, we are not excusing outright crimes. And so we are not excusing individuals who are bad actors and who use crypto to further their crimes, whether it's sanctions violations or money laundering or narcotics trafficking. What we're doing is saying that third-party participants in crypto shouldn't have to sleep with one eye open anymore, that the feds are going to come along and charge them.
Now, that's a better message than the industry has heard in years. Nobody is asking for immunity for people that are, participating in crime. But the real question is where that line gets drawn. What counts as helping? What counts as knowing? Does maintaining code qualify? Writing documentation, running a website, earning a fee? And these aren't hypothetical questions. They've already been tested. Cases like the United States versus Roman Storm and charges against Keone Rodriguez and Bill tied to Samurai Wallet show exactly how unclear that boundary still is. And I would remind you, they are still in federal prison. Developers tied to privacy tools have already faced prosecution, even when the underlying argument is about publishing code versus facilitating crime. And that's why, despite the friendlier tone or appearance of such, many developers are still operating with caution, as they should, still sleeping with one eye open. If the rules are clear, why does the industry still feel exposed? This tension is not theoretical. It has shown up on the ground. The conference floor was filled with Free Samurai signs in support of these samurai developers. At one point, there was even a brief misunderstanding where security treated sign holders as protesters, including Lauren Emily, wife of Keone Rodriguez. She later posted that she'd been escorted out over the signs, but the situation was resolved quickly. On one side, Washington signaling cooperation, even alignment. On the other, a community shaped by past enforcement and not just empty promises. Even longtime critics like Giacomo Zucco are warning developers not to get comfortable, urging anonymity and caution despite the shift in rhetoric. He posted this on X. Quote, "Stay anonymous, guys. Use disposable NIMs. If you have to fall for an obvious trap, at least wait for a less embarrassingly obvious one." Agreed with Giacomo there. Anonymity is key, especially for developers. You can trust the big old state as far as you can throw them. Now, as for why viewers at home should care, this is, I think, a bullish development to see this kind of rhetoric at the Bitcoin conference, but it is not in any way a certainty. This is just talk, and talk is cheap. A softer stance from Washington can reduce pressure and accelerate innovation in the short term for developers, but without clear legal definitions and protections, which they should already have, because of course code is speech, developers are still navigating in gray zones. We hope that the shift in tone will help to free the samurai developers and the other Bitcoin and crypto prisoners who are in federal prison, and that would be the best outcome for the story. And in a system where enforcement can change with the next administration, Bitcoin's core principle still holds: don't trust, verify. And here's the thing, guys, I have trouble taking any of this seriously until the Bitcoin and crypto prisoners who are currently serving sentences in federal prison, who have been persecuted and prosecuted, until they are pardoned and freed. Because again, talk is cheap, and saying, well, look, just come to us, just come on, just come to it. Like, if you're not doing anything wrong, again, it's like the whole, like, why do you need privacy? You have nothing to hide. Don't worry, we're cool, guys. We're cool. Like, sure, you guys, some of your friends are still sitting in federal prison, but it's cool. We're totally different now. And this is the frustrating part to me. It's like, so often pardons are used as political bargaining chips, right? I'm so happy that Ross Ulbricht was pardoned, right? The full and unconditional pardon. He deserved that after spending way too long in prison, in solitary confinement for a lot of it. The struggle that he and his family went through, brutal, right? But that was used as a bargaining chip, right? That was used as something to get people out to vote for Trump. Okay, that's all right, right? Politics is all about horse trading. And ultimately, Ross being free is an incredible thing for him and his family. And, bravo to everybody who fought for that freedom, including his, not least of which is his own mother, fighting tirelessly for years. That was a huge win, and Ross so much deserved to be free. At the same time, we've got other developers, other builders who are in prison right now. Their sentences, their imprisonment may not have the same political capital associated with it right now that Ross's did. Ross was a huge, a huge part of just the general, like, libertarian mindset around this. Not just Bitcoiners, but the whole, like, libertarian community, if you can even say that, was fighting for this. Angela McArdle was doing incredible work on this, among many, many others, right? That was an incredible moment to see Ross get freed, to see promises made and kept there. I'd like to see promises made and kept around Bill Keone and Roman Storm and Ian Freeman and these other crypto and Bitcoin prisoners that are out there. I know that I'm missing a few, so I apologize. I'm not trying to exclude any, just mentioning the ones that come to mind off the top of my head. And Bill and Keone have been on my mind for a long time. As you've seen, I've talked about them quite a lot. Again, if you're just tuning in now, go to billandkeone.org. Keonne is how you spell Keone. billandkeone.org. Sign that petition. Make your voice heard. It doesn't cost you anything. You can tweet about it. You can post about it. That doesn't cost anything either. You can donate to their families if you want. That does cost you something, but if you feel compelled to do so, please go ahead and do it. But until those guys are free, until they are free, all of this is just cheap talk, right? You need to go back and right the wrongs that were done. It is not enough to say, look, guys, yeah, I know things have been screwed up, but that was, that wasn't really our fault, and so, like, nothing. No, there is something you can do. You can just pardon them. There have been so many absolute garbage humans pardoned by, this isn't just a knock on Trump, right? This is a knock on every president does this, right? They pardon just a long list of absolute garbage heap people. I'd like to see some damn fine people be pardoned. People who wrote open source code, who wrote code that is fundamentally pro-American. Because privacy, the right to be left alone, the right to, it's in our Constitution, right? You have rights against unlawful search and seizure. These are things that are fundamentally pro-America, that are enshrined in our Constitution. You have the right to free speech. Code is a form of speech. All of these things, the fact that these men are still sitting in prison is an abomination. It is an insult to the incredible work that our founding fathers did to make this a free country. free from, England, who we're going to hear from later in the king's address to his former subjects. But I'd like to see these guys actually get pardoned, actually get freed. Until then, again, this is just cheap talk. This is just, okay, yeah, it sounds real nice, but words cost you nothing. Actions are what matter. So let's see some actions, right? Let's see some actual movement on this. Let's see pardons put forward without them needing to have any sort of, political football attached to them. President Trump has the option to just do the right thing, which is to pardon these guys. Doesn't have to be the political, if he's looking for a political win, the political win is just doing what is right, what is moral, what is in line with our Constitution, right? That should be enough of a win for any president. That should be enough. I hope that it is. I hope that President Trump actually looks at this. I know, months ago he said he was looking at this case when asked about it during a press conference. Haven't seen any movement on it since then. So let's see. But until this happens, all of this posturing to me is just kind of meaningless. It's just kind of meaningless. I would like to see these guys actually get pardoned. And until then, Giacomo is absolutely correct. Developers should stay as anonymous as they possibly can, because we know that even, the Southern/Sovereign District of New York brought these charges against, I'll speak about Bill and Keone specifically, because that's the case I know the most about. I talked to Keone in the week before he and Bill had to report to prison. And hearing that story, it's just insane. The fact that these guys were, first of all, they've been operating for 10 years. They've been operating for 10 years, operating Samurai Wallet, and they had mixing services associated with it, non-custodial. They never had control of user funds at any time. Did they take fees for the service they provided? Yes. But they never once had control of that money. Not at all like JP Morgan Chase had direct control of the money they laundered for Jeffrey Epstein, right? Nobody went to jail for that. Nobody's sitting in federal prison for that. You just pay a fine, a slap on the wrist as a cost of doing business. Because, baby, when you're one of the big banks, it's a big club and you ain't in it, in the words of the immortal George Carlin, right? When you're at the big banks, you just pay a fine as a cost of doing business. Even when you launder money and control that money, custody that money for child sex traffickers. But guys like Bill and Keone, who provided a non-custodial service where they never had control of user funds, they're the ones sitting in federal prison. I think that is just fundamentally, pardon my French, but it's just fucked up. It's just blatantly wrong. And not only that, you look deeper into their case and you see that FinCEN, the ones in charge of actually saying who is a money transmitter, right? And giving you a money transmitter license, FinCEN's line in the sand is if you control user funds, whether it's dollars or Bitcoin, at any point, you're a money transmitter. If you're controlling funds, you're a money transmitter. If you have custody of those funds, you're a money transmitter. If you have custody of those funds and you are classified as a money transmitter, but you don't have a money transmitter license, you're operating as an unlicensed money transmitter, which is a crime. Okay. And set aside just whether you think that's a good law in the first place, but that's the line they drew. The Samurai devs were operating completely within the law. The prosecutors from the Southern District, Sovereign District of New York, went to FinCEN 6 months before they brought charges against the Samurai developers. And they asked FinCEN, are these guys in violation of your rules? FinCEN said, nope, they're not. They're not custodying funds. That's our line that we draw. So nope, they're not a money transmitter. Therefore, they're not an unlicensed money transmitter. You can't be an unlicensed money transmitter if you're not a money transmitter, right? Southern District of New York brought charges against them anyway, brought SWAT teams to their houses, kicked in their doors in the middle of the night, dawn raids, took them away from their families, put them on trial, threatened them with ridiculous sentences, tried to fine them for every dollar's worth of Bitcoin that had ever passed through their service, assuming that all of it was somehow, used for illegal activity. This is just insane. So you've got basically rogue prosecutors that are going against what even the regulator who is in charge of deciding who would be in violation of these rules says. And they're still in prison. So I just would ask President Trump to right that wrong. These guys do not deserve to be in prison. They're not criminals. They're freedom fighters. They are ultimately, that is as American as it gets, to provide a service where, again, they weren't in violation of anything. They've been operating for 10 years. But they're providing a service that is pro-American, helping people retain some of their privacy in an increasingly totalitarian panopticon age. That, I think, is a noble cause, and certainly not one that should land you in federal prison, especially because you didn't actually break any laws. This was just bullshit. But let's see. So again, if Blanche and Patel want to actually put their money where their mouth is, go get Trump to pardon these guys. Get Trump to pardon Bill Keone, Roman Storm, Ian Freeman. Get him to pardon all of these Bitcoin and crypto prisoners who have been prosecuted unjustly. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see actual action. Otherwise, again, talk is very, very cheap. Okay, we are going to take a live look now inside of the Capitol as lawmakers prepare to hear from King Charles for the 250th anniversary of U.S. independence. Let's go ahead and listen in. We've got no audio yet, but all right. I do think maybe just to, it is somewhat humorous that, on our 250th, as we approach our 250th anniversary of independence from 1776, that, we've got the King of England coming in here. I mean, it's just, I can't tell if it's a troll or not. Maybe it is. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. But it is kind of humorous. It's really quite ironic. And let's see if we're about to get this audio or not. Okay, we're still waiting. We're still waiting on some of the audio to come in. So we're going to go ahead and hit a quick commercial break. When we come back, we will hopefully hear from His Eminence. I'm not sure what the technical term is. The King of England, Charles, as he addresses U.S. Congress there in D.C. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back here on RoxomTV in just a moment.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets, and my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
How about stretch preferred stock on Roxom? Receive 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
11.5% paid in Bitcoin? How is that possible?
It's real. Stretch dividends on Roxom gives 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
Dang! I want everyone pitching Roxom to your clients. Corporate traders, asset managers, old, young. Stretch on Roxom is for everyone.
Now that's a birthday gift. 11.5% in Bitcoin.
We are in heaven at 11.5. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Oh, I forgot to mention, dividends on Roxom are paid in Bitcoin. Stretch your income, 11.5% paid in Bitcoin.
Stretch your income to 11.5, get 11.5 in Bitcoin and Roxom. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Welcome back to RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is 76,221 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. We're about to take a live look inside the Capitol as lawmakers prepare to hear from King Charles for the 250th anniversary of U.S. independence from England. But while we wait for King Charles to arrive, we are going to dig into one more story here. Because during the Bitcoin conference in Vegas happening right now on a panel hosted by the Bitcoin Policy Institute, Congressman Nick Begich revealed he's reintroducing the Bitcoin Act under a new name, the American Reserves Modernization Act, or ARMA. Let's take a listen.
We've been working with the Financial Services Committee to make some updates to that act, and we'll be planning on reintroducing this as the American Reserves Modernization Act, or ARMA. And why the renaming? Because it's so important for people, both in Congress and across the nation, to understand what we're actually trying to do. We're trying to make sure that Bitcoin is treated like the reserve asset that it is. We want to make sure that we have a place to store our Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is going to be held for a long period of time, that it's going to be prevented from being attached, right? So you can't lend against it, and we can't have that political pendulum that we see so often in the United States impact our reserves policy as it relates to Bitcoin. It allows us to go out into those government agencies, identify where Bitcoin is currently being held, and custody that Bitcoin in a responsible manner consistent with its reserve status. And so this has been one of the many things that I've been working on in Congress. I'm proud to say that as of today, I've passed more legislation into law than anyone in the House or Senate. And so we've got a strong, thank you. We've got a strong focus in my office to construct legislation that has an opportunity to pass both chambers, and that's what we're doing with the American Reserves Modernization Act.
Wow. What's the rough timeline there?
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't control the timeline. That's one thing I don't control. But we're looking at a reintroduction here within the next couple of weeks.
Now, this matters. The Bitcoin Act had gone quiet in recent months with little signal out of D.C. This confirms it's still alive and being repositioned to actually move through Congress, hopefully. The rebrand is the story. It's about translating Bitcoin into language Washington can pass, reserves, strategy, and national balance sheets. The broader theme of the panel was self-custody and the push for clearer legal protections around holding your own Bitcoin without intermediaries. And this wasn't the only headline. Later on stage, Patrick Witt, executive director of the President's Council of Advisors for Digital Assets, said there could be a major announcement in the coming weeks tied to a potential U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Overall, the president signed the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve executive order last year, and we've gone to work in figuring out exactly the machinations necessary and legal interpretations that we need to get that right and solidify that and protect the digital assets, but specifically Bitcoin that we have on the government balance sheet. So in the next few weeks, we'll be making a big announcement. I think we have a bit of a breakthrough there. And obviously that needs to be followed up with legislation. Senator Lummis's Bitcoin Act over in the House, Representative Begich has talked about the ARMA Act that he has put together. So we need to codify it, but in the meantime, we do believe we're going to be able to take a big step forward from the executive branch side in the next few weeks.
That's huge news. So.
If the U.S. moves toward a strategic Bitcoin reserve, even rebranded as ARMA, it changes how nation-states perceive Bitcoin. As Cynthia Lummis once said, if the U.S. adopts a strategic reserve, other nations will have FOMO. This doesn't just validate Bitcoin as a reserve asset, it kicks off a global race, and yes, that likely sends the price much, much higher. All we can say is we're still early, we'll know more in a few weeks, but above all, this might be a very good time to stack some Bitcoin. And a couple of thoughts on this. First of all, not holding my breath. Let's see what happens. I think that Congressman Begich and, of course, Cynthia Lummis, who will be retiring after this term, unfortunately, because she is one of the good ones, they've been trying very hard to make this happen, but things move slowly in Washington. Now, you may also say, well, we should be fighting against the government stacking Bitcoin, right? Why would you even be talking about this? And I think it's important to point out that this is what it looks like when Bitcoin wins. Like, Bitcoin is winning. Bitcoin will continue to win. And because of that, every individual, every corporation, every nation state in the world will want to hold Bitcoin. This is a natural result of Bitcoin winning, right? This is what we would expect if Bitcoin was succeeding, is successful. So that's why we're seeing it. It's logical. You don't have to like it, but it is going to happen. It is naturally going to happen. Bitcoin wasn't winning. If Bitcoin was a big old loser, you wouldn't see this. If we're talking about Ethereum, no nation states are trying to stack Ethereum or Solana, right? Or heaven forbid XRP. Of course not. Those are shit coins. Bitcoin is the one that matters. So yes, every nation state will eventually be stacking it. Many have started already, not just through confiscatory measures like the United States has done to date, but you look at El Salvador or the Kingdom of Bhutan mining Bitcoin with excess hydropower. This is very much happening. Reports of other nations, whether it be Russia or others that have been secretly mining Bitcoin, like who knows, right? But one would guess if they've got people that are smart enough to figure out that Bitcoin is in fact something that is unique, that they would be focusing on this and presumably trying to do a lot of early stacking under the radar, right? Before everyone catches on, because there will be a race to accumulate Bitcoin once the sort of starting gun goes off here. And I don't know exactly what that starting gun will be. Is the starting gun some formalization, some codification into law of a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Act, like through the Bitcoin Act? Is it something else? Is it, does that not really happen until a nation starts actively printing their own fiat currency to acquire Bitcoin? I'm not exactly sure. But it certainly is going to be interesting. And I'm hearing that we may have an update on the stream. It looks like King Charles has just arrived into the U.S. Congress there to deliver his address. Let's see what happens. Do we have audio on this yet? No audio yet. Okay, that's quite all right. 250 years after we declared our independence from England, they are coming back. Boy, maybe it's because things are a little bit dark over there in the old, not so United Kingdom right now. If you are a British or UK citizen listening to this, by the way, any digs that I make against England are not against you as a citizen. They are against the government, as are any digs I make against any nation. They are always against the state. They're never against the individuals. And it looks like we have audio coming in now. So let's go to it and hear what King Charles has to say. He arrives to thunderous applause.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you His Majesty Charles III.
More applause.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of Congress, representatives of the American people across all states, territories, cities, and communities. I would like, if I may, to take this opportunity to express my particular gratitude to you all for the great honor of addressing this joint meeting of Congress. And on behalf of the Queen and myself, to thank the American people for welcoming us to the United States to mark this semi-quincentennial year of the Declaration of Independence. And for all of that time,
for America declaring its independence.
And for all of that time, our destinies as nations have been interlinked. As Oscar Wilde said, we have really everything in common with America nowadays, except, of course, language. So, ladies and gentlemen, we meet in times of great uncertainty, in times of conflict from Europe to the Middle East, which pose immense challenges for the international community and whose impact is felt in communities the length and breadth of our own countries. We meet, too, in the aftermath of the incident not far from this great building that sought to harm the leadership of your nation and to foment wider fear and discord. Let me say with unshakable resolve, such acts of violence will never succeed. Whatever our differences, whatever disagreements we may have, we stand united in our commitment to uphold democracy, to protect all our people from harm, and to salute the courage of those who daily risk their lives in the service of our countries. Standing here today, it is hard not to feel the weight of history on my shoulder, because the modern relationship between our two nations and our own peoples spans not merely 250 years, but over 4 centuries. It is extraordinary to think that I am the 19th in our line of sovereigns to study with daily attention the affairs of America. So I come here today with the highest respect for the United States Congress, this citadel of democracy created to represent the voice of all American people to advance sacred rights and freedoms. Speaking in this renowned chamber of debate and deliberation, I cannot help but think of my late mother, Queen Elizabeth, who in 1991 was also afforded this signal honor and similarly spoke under the watchful eye of the Statue of Freedom above us. Today, I am here on this great occasion in the life of our nations to express the highest regard and friendship of the British people to the people of the United States. Now, as you may know, when I address my own Parliament at Westminster, we still follow an age-old tradition and take a Member of Parliament hostage, holding him or her at Buckingham Palace until I am safely returned. These days, we look after our guests rather well, to the point that they often do not want to leave. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if there were any volunteers for that role here today. As I look back across the centuries, Mr. Speaker, there emerge certain patterns, certain self-evident truths from which we can learn and draw mutual strength. With the spirit of 1776 in our minds, we can perhaps agree that we do not always agree, at least in the first instance. Indeed, the very principle on which your Congress was founded, no taxation without representation, was at once a fundamental disagreement between us, and at the same time a shared democratic value which you inherited from us. Ours is a partnership born out of dispute, but no less strong for it. So perhaps in this example, we can discern that our nations are in fact instinctively like-minded, a product of the common democratic, legal, and social traditions in which our governance is rooted to this day. Drawing on these values and traditions, time and again, our two countries have always found ways to come together. And by Jove, Mr. Speaker, when we have found that way to agree, what great change is brought about, not just for the benefit of our peoples, but of all peoples. This, I believe, is the special ingredient in our relationship. As President Trump himself observed during his state visit to Britain last autumn, the bond of kinship and identity between America and the United Kingdom is priceless and eternal. It is irreplaceable and unbreakable. Mr. Speaker, this is by no means my first visit to Washington, D.C., the capital of this great republic. It is, in fact, my 20th visit to the United States and my first as King and head of the Commonwealth. This is a city which symbolizes a period in our shared history, or what Charles Dickens might have called a tale of two Georges. The first president, George Washington, and my 5 times great-grandfather, King George III. King George, as you know, never set foot in America, and please rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, I am not here as part of some cunning rearguard action.
I don't think we were worried.
The founding fathers were bold and imaginative rebels with a cause. 250 years ago, or as we say in the United Kingdom, just the other day, they declared independence. By balancing contending forces and drawing strength in diversity, they united 13 disparate colonies to forge a nation on the revolutionary idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They carried with them and carried forward the great inheritance of the British Enlightenment, as well as the ideals which had an even deeper history in English common law and Magna Carta. These roots run deep, and they are still vital. Our Declaration of Rights of 1689 was not only the foundation of our constitutional monarchy, but also provided the source of so many of the principles reiterated, often verbatim, in the American Bill of Rights of 1791. And those roots go even further back in history. The US Supreme Court Historical Society has calculated that Magna Carta is cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789, not least as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances. This is the reason why there stands a stone by the River Thames at Runnymede, where Magna Carta was signed in the year 1215. This stone records that an acre of that ancient and historic site was given to the United States of America by the people of the United Kingdom to symbolize our shared resolve in support of liberty and in memory of President John F. Kennedy. Distinguished members of the 119th Congress, it is here in these very halls that this spirit of liberty and the promise of America's founders is present in every session and every vote cast, not by the will of one, but by the deliberation of many, representing the living mosaic of the United States. In both of our countries, it is the very fact of our vibrant, diverse, and free societies that gives us our collective strength, including to support victims of some of the ills that so tragically exist in both our societies today. And, Mr. Speaker, for many here, and for myself, the Christian faith is a firm anchor and daily inspiration that guides us, not only personally, that guides us not only personally, but together as members of our community. Having devoted a large part of my life to interfaith relationships and greater understanding, it is that faith in the triumph of light over darkness which I have found confirmed countless times. Through it, I am inspired by the profound respect that develops as people of different faiths grow in their understanding of each other. It is why, it is my hope, my prayer, that in these turbulent times, working together and with our international partners, we can stem the beating of plowshares into swords. I am mindful that we are still in the season of Easter, the season that most strengthens my hope. It is why I believe with all my heart that the essence of our two nations is a generosity of spirit and a duty to foster compassion, to promote peace, to deepen mutual understanding, and to value all people of all faiths and of none. The alliance that our two nations have built over the centuries, and for which we are profoundly grateful to the American people, is truly unique. And that alliance is part of what Henry Kissinger described as Kennedy's soaring vision of an Atlantic partnership based on twin pillars, Europe and America. That partnership, I believe, Mr. Speaker, is more important today than it has ever been. The first reigning British sovereign to set foot in America was my grandfather, King George VI. He visited in 1939 with my beloved grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The forces of fascism in Europe were on the march, and sometime before the United States had joined us in the defense of freedom, our shared values prevailed. Today, we find ourselves in a new era, but those values remain. It is an era that is in many ways more volatile and more dangerous than the world to which my late mother spoke in this chamber in 1991. The challenges we face are too great for any one nation to bear alone. But in this unpredictable environment, our alliance cannot rest on past achievements or assume that foundational principles simply endure. As my Prime Minister said last month, ours is an indispensable partnership. We must not disregard everything that has sustained us for the last 80 years. Instead, we must build on it. Renewal today starts with security. The United Kingdom recognizes that the threats we face demand a transformation in British defense. That is why our country, in order to be fit for the future, has committed to the biggest sustained increase in defense spending since the Cold War, during part of which, over 50 years ago, I served with immense pride in the Royal Navy, following in the naval footsteps of my father, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, my grandfather, King George VI, my great-uncle, Lord Mountbatten, and my great-grandfather, King George V. This year, of course, also marks the 25th anniversary of 9/11. This atrocity was a defining moment for America, and your pain and shock were felt around the whole world. During my visit to New York, my wife and I will again pay our respects to the victims, the families, and the bravery shown in the face of terrible loss. We stood with you then, and we stand with you now in solemn remembrance of a day that shall never be forgotten. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, when NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time, and the United Nations Security Council was united in the face of terror, we answered the call together, as our people have done so for more than a century, shoulder to shoulder through 2 world wars, the Cold War, Afghanistan, and moments that have defined our shared security. Today, Mr. Speaker, that same unyielding resolve is needed for the defense of Ukraine and her most courageous people. It is needed in order to secure a truly just and lasting peace. From the depths of the Atlantic to the disastrously melting ice caps of the Arctic, the commitment and expertise of the United States Armed Forces and its allies lie at the heart of NATO, pledged to each other's defense, protecting our citizens and interests, keeping North Americans and Europeans safe from our common adversaries. Our defense, intelligence, and security ties are hardwired together through relationships measured not in years, but in decades. Today, thousands of US service personnel, defense officials and their families are stationed in the United Kingdom, as British personnel serve with equal pride across 30 American states. We are building F-35s together, and we have agreed the most ambitious submarine program in history, AUKUS. And we are doing it in partnership with Australia, a country of which I'm also immensely proud to serve as sovereign. We do not embark on these remarkable endeavors together out of sentiment. We do so because they build greater shared resilience for the future, so making our citizens safer for generations to come. Our common ideals were not only crucial for liberty and equality, they are also the foundation of our shared prosperity. The rule of law, the certainty of stable and accessible rules, an independent judiciary, resolving disputes, and delivering impartial justice. These features created the conditions for centuries of unmatched economic growth in our two countries. This is why our governments are concluding new economic and technology agreements to write the next chapter of our joint prosperity and ensure that British and American ingenuity continues to lead the world. Our nations are combining talent and resources in the technologies of tomorrow. Our new partnerships in nuclear fusion and quantum computing and in AI and drug discovery, holding the promise of saving countless lives. More broadly, we celebrate the $430 billion in annual trade that continues to grow, the $1.7 trillion in mutual investment that fuels that innovation, and the millions of jobs on both sides of the Atlantic, supported across both economies. These are strong foundations on which to continue to build for generations yet unborn. Our ties in education, research, and cultural exchange empower citizens and future leaders of both countries. The Marshall Scholarship, named after the great General George Marshall, and the association of which I am so proud to be patron, are emblematic of the connection between our two countries. Since its founding, more than 2,300 scholarships have been awarded, opening doors for Americans from all walks of life to study at the United Kingdom's leading universities. So as we look toward the next 250 years, we must also reflect on our shared responsibility to safeguard nature, our most precious and irreplaceable asset. Millennia before our nations existed, before any border drawn, the mountains of Scotland and Appalachia were one, a single continuous range forged in the ancient collision of continents. The natural wonders of the United States of America are indeed a unique asset, and generations of Americans have risen to this calling. Indigenous, political, and civic leaders, people in rural communities and cities alike, have all helped to protect and nurture what President Theodore Roosevelt called the glorious heritage of this land's extraordinary natural splendor, on which so much of its prosperity has always depended. Yet, even as we celebrate the beauty that surrounds us, our generation must decide how to address the collapse of critical natural systems, which threatens far more than the harmony and essential diversity of nature. We ignore at our peril the fact that these natural systems, in other words, nature's own economy, provide the foundation for our prosperity and our national security. The story of the United Kingdom and the United States is at its heart a story of reconciliation, renewal, and remarkable partnership. From the bitter divisions of 250 years ago, we forged a friendship that has grown into one of the most consequential alliances in human history. I pray with all my heart that our alliance will continue to defend our shared values with our partners in Europe and the Commonwealth and across the world. And that we ignore the clarion calls to become ever more inward-looking. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, America's words carry weight and meaning, as they have since independence. The actions of this great nation matter even more. President Lincoln understood this so well with his reflection in the magisterial Gettysburg Address, that the world may little note what we say, but will never forget what we do. And so to the United States of America, on your 250th birthday, let our two countries rededicate ourselves to each other in the selfless service of our peoples and of all the peoples of the world. God bless the United States, and God bless the United Kingdom.
All right, and that is that. King Charles addressing the U.S. Congress leading up to our 250th anniversary of declaring independence from the nation of which he is currently king. That was very polite, and boy, I feel like I could use a coffee after it. But it is nice to see our former sovereign coming back across the pond to deliver an address. I think it's also a good reminder of just how unique America is. I mean, you heard he's still the sovereign of Australia and of Canada. People may forget this. I mean, imagine if the United States was still underneath the British crown. I think it's a great reminder of how unique America is, how exceptional America is, especially in the UK right now, and not that the king has any control over this, but where they don't even have the right to basic free speech, right? Where you can be jailed for social media posts, where you can't own guns. I mean, except in the UK and very, very limited exceptions for hunting and things like that. Our U.S., not only was our Declaration of Independence incredibly important, but the Constitution that we developed, that our founding fathers wrote after that, was so incredibly foundational and cementing those inalienable rights, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then each of our amendments to the Constitution really setting in stone, hopefully, these rights which the government is not able or should not be able to infringe upon. America is very unique in that regard, and I think this is a good and very polite reminder of that. You know, we need to protect our freedoms if we expect to have any. America is unique in this world. America is quite exceptional. And there is a reason that we, have been around for now a very long time. Not long in terms of England, but in terms of being a functioning constitutional republic for a very long time. I mean, people forget this, but it's like Italy as a nation has not even been around, not even nearly as long as the United States, right? People don't remember that. Of course, Italy, was a combination of different states prior to that. But the point here being that this is a good reminder that in America, we have developed something that is worth fighting for, that is worth cherishing, that is worth protecting. And that is the freedom of the individual, the freedom to choose, the freedom to organize, the freedom to protest our government, the freedom to speak freely, whether that be verbal speech, written speech, or writing open source code, as we discussed earlier. It's also a great reminder that Bitcoin is fundamentally aligned with with Western values. And especially as you see some of those Western values eroding in other countries around the world, America needs to be that last bastion of freedom. Because if not us, who, right? And if we don't stand up for this now, then when? We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we will be back in just a moment. We've got a couple more stories to round out this 3-hour marathon here on Tuesday. So do not touch that dial. We will be right back here on RoxomTV with more. Stay tuned.
How about Stretch preferred stock on Roxom? Receive 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
11.5% paid in Bitcoin? How is that possible?
It's real. Stretch dividends on Roxom gives 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
Dang! I want everyone pitching Roxom to your clients. Corporate traders, asset managers, old, young, Stretch on Roxom is for everyone.
Now that's a birthday gift. 11.5% in Bitcoin.
We are in heaven at 11.5. 11.5%.
Welcome back to RoxomTV. Governor Alice Mikkel of the Czech National Bank just revealed new internal research showing that even a 1% allocation to Bitcoin can increase expected returns without meaningfully increasing overall portfolio risk. He shared that today while speaking at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas.
The first time I used Bitcoin, I bought a coffee in Prague, which is capital city of the Czech Republic, about 10 years ago. Today, that coffee comes to about $350. So it was the most expensive coffee of my life. You know that Bitcoin had very high returns, but honestly, it looks risky. Its volatility is much higher than of other assets. One day, its price may be much higher, or it could go to zero. Yes, zero. And that is true for other assets too. A stock can go to zero, even a bond can fail. So for me, that is why it is not wise to bet just on one asset. We have to think about the whole portfolio. The next point on this chart is what we found in our new paper, in our new working paper. This is our model portfolio with 1% in Bitcoin. And here comes the interesting part. With 1% in Bitcoin, expected return goes up and overall risk stays about the same in our Czech currency. So this is what our new study shows.
This is a central bank running portfolio models, not a startup making a pitch. And the conclusion is clear. Bitcoin's volatility is high, but its low correlation to traditional assets improves the mix. Now, here's where it gets real. The Czech Republic is one of the most forward-moving jurisdictions in Europe on Bitcoin policy. Under current tax rules, individuals do not pay capital gains tax on Bitcoin if they hold it for more than 3 years. Short-term gains are taxed, but long-term holding is incentivized. That's a big shift. It treats Bitcoin less like a trade and more like a long-term asset. And this didn't happen overnight. The Czech Republic has a long history with Bitcoin. Prague had some of the earliest adoption, mining activity, and even the first hardware wallet company, Satoshi Labs. So put it together. A central bank is modeling Bitcoin in portfolios, a government rewarding long-term holders with zero capital gains tax, and a country with deep roots in Bitcoin culture. The Czech Republic is not just experimenting anymore, it's leading. And this, I honestly, again, this is one of those things where you may say, well, but Walker, this is a central bank, come on. It's like, yeah, it is. And again, this is inevitable that central banks will come to this conclusion. The Czech central bank just appears to be a bit ahead of the curve on this. And again, the Czech Republic, Prague specifically has been very much the forefront of the Bitcoin adoption movement for many years now. A great Bitcoin conference over there as well, BTC Prague. If you haven't checked it out, I have not been able to go since the first inaugural year, but it was a great time then and looking forward to going back again soon. But I think that it's very telling. This is a shift in the Overton window, right? The Czech National Bank, they had allocated, I think, something like $1 million in their portfolio to Bitcoin, which is not very much for a central bank, but it's still something. And now to have a Czech central banker talking about this in such a positive light and saying things which Bitcoiners have been saying, of course, for some time. But when a central banker says it, different sorts of people start to listen. And so, again, I think any shifts in the Overton window that bring Bitcoin more to the center are ultimately good for adoption. I also think that law about, hey, if you're gonna have capital gains tax, removing the capital gains tax after 3 years of holding is honestly pretty great. I mean, I'd like to see no taxes whatsoever, but we're a long way from there, right? But in absence of that, this is something that I think would be fantastic to implement in the United States. I highly doubt we get it because the IRS loves taking its pound of unearned flesh, but alas, a guy can dream. Bangladesh has become a nuclear-powered nation with the help of Russia. The country began loading nuclear fuel into a Russian-designed, built, and financed nuclear plant. Once fully operational, the plant will cover more than 10% of Bangladesh's entire electricity demand. Bangladesh sought $2 billion in emergency loans from multilateral agencies earlier this year, specifically to cover surging fuel import costs tied to the Hormuz crisis. The Rapport plant is the answer it chose instead: long-term, domestically generated base load power. Bangladesh, a country of 170 million people, squeezed by $111 oil and the Iran war it has nothing to do with, just handed Russia a permanent foothold in its energy infrastructure to escape dependence on imported fuel. That's what energy insecurity actually looks like at the national level. You take the deal that's in front of you. Bangladesh isn't the last developing nation that's going to make that calculation. Every week Hormuz stays closed, more countries are doing the math on who's offering them a way out. And at least Bangladesh is going with a logical option, which is nuclear power. It is absolutely insane to me that a country like Germany completely decommissioned all of its nuclear plants, allegedly under the guise of climate change or some sort of nuclear hysteria or something like that. I'm not sure what exact logic there was behind it. Clearly not much, because if you were operating on logic, you would, of course, not decommission nuclear plants providing incredibly clean baseload power. You would want more of that. It is just insane to me that more nations are not realizing this, and that some nations like Germany are in fact going backward in this. You have this incredible baseload power source that provides you with very, very clean energy, which apparently, people profess to care about, and yet you see them decommissioning nuclear power plants in Germany. This just makes absolutely no sense. You're increasing your external energy dependence. France has been a net energy exporter for a number of years, specifically because they have so much nuclear power in France. I'd like to see us build out a heck of a lot more of it in the United States. It is ultimately the most logical way to do these things. But apparently, again, logic is often left at the door when things become somehow politicized by people who have a distinct lack of the ability to use logic and reason. Next up, almost 100,000 tech workers have been laid off so far in 2026. Meta, Microsoft, Oracle, and Block are among the biggest cutters, and AI is the primary reason. Block CEO Jack Dorsey was the bluntest and most honest of all. In the largest AI-attributed layoff in corporate history, Dorsey wrote an ode to the now endless agentic capabilities, explaining people just aren't as needed anymore. Against that backdrop, Anthropic is now hiring event leads, people whose entire jobs are to bring people together in a room. Every company building AI is telling you jobs are going away, but even the ones actually betting on the future are still hiring humans to do the things AI can't. Read a room, shake a hand, and connect with someone. Events aren't a relic of the pre-AI economy. They're a signal that human presence isn't optional. And I think this is quite interesting. And again, in an increasingly AI-driven world, which we are obviously entering, we've seen the rate of change on these things. I mean, it was just a couple of years ago that the first version of ChatGPT or Mid-Journey for image generation was coming out and just blowing our minds. And now, if you look back on that, even just a couple of years ago, it seems just like such a silly toy in comparison. Kind of a little novelty. Whereas now the power has just increased exponentially and will continue to do so. But at the same time, I think in a world that is increasing where people are outsourcing their thoughts and their creativity, where so much of that is being outsourced to AI, where AI will replace, of course, a lot of jobs, as every technological revolution does, right? This is not something that is unique to AI. Perhaps the rate at which this change will happen will be accelerated in this AI era. I think the rate of change also accelerates in each technological revolution that happens. So that, again, that's not something new, but let's see, this does appear to be a faster trajectory than most. But at the same time, I think that, and a lot of people, I think if you're listening to this, you've probably felt this feeling of, as things move to be increasingly digital, as things move to be increasingly AI generated, increasingly, generative, people crave human connection more than ever, right? Because it's harder to find. I think that is going to only increase again as AI becomes more pervasive, as it becomes more ubiquitous in everything we do. People want to deal with people. People want to socialize with people. Yes, you have people whose, their best friend is becoming ChatGPT, right? But I think that most people don't want that. They don't want that at all. What they want is human connection. What they want is local community. They want to be able to meet somebody at their local bar or at their church or at their, community meetup. And they want to be able to actually have a unique human interaction with somebody in the meet space, right? Versus somebody in the metaverse. And so I think that we'll see one potential, looking at the glass half full here, is that perhaps the increasing pervasiveness of AI actually drives people back into the real world more than ever as they search for things that are real, as they search for human connection, as they crave it. Because human beings, we are social creatures. It's how we've been able to survive and thrive is through cooperation, right? Voluntary cooperation, not forced coercion like communism. See, I brought that full circle at the beginning of this. Look at that. But that really is how human civilization has grown and thrived, and how it will continue to, is through human cooperation and I think human connection in the physical world. I also think that in an age where so much is easy to fake, it's becoming easier than ever to create incredibly believable video footage, even of events that have never happened. People's trust in media, but trust in any sort of digital media, is decreasing more and more and more, except for perhaps the boomers on Facebook who still thinks Jesus rode into Las Vegas on a rainbow unicorn, and just can't believe that somebody got that incredible photograph of him. But really, I think that this is where independent news, independent human creators are going to become even more important, because while it is incredibly convenient to get AI generated summaries read to you by an AI anchor, at least you know that I'm real, right? I also have to stand by what I say on these live broadcasts, right? You have somebody that you can hold accountable, hopefully somebody that you can trust, but like with Bitcoin, don't trust, verify. But I think that this is going to be a tendency as well, even though it will be easier than ever to get AI generated content for anything customized for you at your fingertips. People still want and desire a human connection to somebody who is actually bringing them their unique human perspective, flawed as it may be. I am certainly never going to be as perfect or as complete as an AI when it comes to my recognition of exact facts and figures, or the exact dates that happen for some particular conflict or another. I may get some of that wrong occasionally. I'll do my best not to. And of course, our team at Roxom does a good job of keeping me honest as well, and making sure I've got the best information to bring to you guys in real time. But still, although we human anchors, human creators, human podcasters, human artists may be fallible, that's kind of the point, right? Is that human imperfection is what makes us human. And so it'll be a very interesting time ahead of us. I've got a young son, 2 years old. It's going to be very interesting to see what the world looks like when he's 18 years old, heck, when he's my age in his early 30s. It's going to be somewhat unrecognizable, I think. But also, probably as much as many things will change, many will stay the same. Again, I think there's going to be a tendency for us to go back to basics. You're seeing this like with this Anthropic story. Now these companies focusing on how can we create more actual human interactions between these people working together? How can we just be human? Unfortunately, it needs to be forced a little bit now, apparently. But I think we're going to see more and more of a desire and an impetus to move back toward that, to move back toward local, decentralized communities, smaller communities. As the global panopticon increases and becomes ever more pervasive and AI driven, people want to be able to check out. They want to be able to go offline. They want to be able to go in person. They want to be able to meet together in the meet space, in the physical world, to shake a hand, give a hug, have a conversation while looking a real human being in the eye without any AI standing in between you or providing help during, let's say, a fiery debate. It's a lot harder to be constantly generating AI slop when you have to actually look somebody in the eye the entire time. So my hope, again, glass half full here, is that the increased pervasiveness of AI actually pushes us humans back toward a simpler way of interacting together as we crave that more, as we crave a return back to what once was, and what may now be even more accessible to more people because of the abundance that technology creates. That is, assuming that all of that abundance does not continue to be stolen by the fiat money printers. But thankfully, we also have Bitcoin, a way to protect yourself, preserve the value of your time and energy, a way for us to actually plan long ahead into the future. What that future looks like, we do not necessarily know, but at least we've got a way to plan for it. And I hope to meet more of you in the meet space as well, because I always prefer it. Well, that's a wrap on our show here today on RoxomTV. Again, I'm Walker America. I am with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Roxom. I'll also be on Hank's show every Thursday and Friday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to check that out here on Roxom as well, and check out all the other great content that we put out for you every single day. live and in color here on RoxomTV. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for sharing your scarce time with us here on Roxom. I will see you guys next week. Take care.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow